Thank you, Jane, for catching that. Is it going yet? There we go. Okay, sweet. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And Brian, thanks for sticking with us as we're getting going live here. So, Career Lab Wednesday. I'm here every Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. Had a little hiccup there getting live today. All good now. We are rolling. And what we're talking about is emotional intelligence in your community. And specifically, because this is Career Lab, around your career. If you want to ask questions about somewhere else, that's fine too. I invite all questions career related, and I'll invite any questions about emotional intelligence as well. So there's a few ways that you can engage. You can jump in directly here on Zoom. I love it when you do that. I get to work with you directly. If you can't do that, you can type your questions into the comment section on LinkedIn and on YouTube. And Jane will get those over to me. I'll do my best to answer those questions. So what I'm saying is that emotional intelligence, that's the foundation. That's your relationship with your feelings. Now, well, often you might catch yourself or catch other people saying things like, well, part of me wants to do this and part of me is thinking I should do this. So, we're in a complex organization. Every person is a complex system. And so the more that I understand this system that I am, the better I can use what I have with me, my being, to get the results that I want. And a core thing to this is our emotional intelligence. All kinds of research has been done on this for now very strongly the past 30 years, but Candace Pert was working on this back in the 60s and 70s. And so, there's a great amount of research in this. And what the overall context is that most of us are trained from early on that certain feelings are bad or negative. And I hear experts say negative emotions. And the reframe that we're working with is to consider that all emotions are useful, that every emotion serves a purpose. And so in that context, the more that I'm aware of what I'm feeling, and instead of indicting myself for having that feeling or trying not to have that feeling, then I can use that feeling to be more effective in a given scenario. Now, if I'm interacting with people, let's say I am in an interview and I'm noticing fear, my fears that I have about what it might be like working at this company. And I can suss out things like, oh, am I just afraid that this person isn't going to like me? How helpful is that in this interaction right now? Not that helpful. Okay. Oh, but you know what? I'm also kind of realizing I'm concerned about some of the ways that this interview is going. That can alert me then to possible issues in the company or with the project that I'm interviewing for, or whatever it may be. And then I can use that to ask questions that help me understand better what's going on, and also move from trying to impress somebody, which only goes so far. People get sick of trying to be impressed, and move that anxiety, that fear towards whatever the issues are that are going on with the company that they want more help with. And so I can be more focused and purposeful with the feeling. Once I first start accepting that feeling in myself and getting more comfortable with allowing that feeling to flow through me. So emotional intelligence, what's going on inside of me. Social intelligence, what's going on inside of me and the people I'm interacting with, and how does that dance play out? So that's the overall concept that we're working with today. cultivating emotional intelligence in yourself and in your network and in your workspace creates more resonance, more stickiness. Things that you say will take hold better in the minds of other people when there's an emotional component to it. You think about speakers that you would see, and ones who are emotionally intelligent are able to connect with you in a different kind of way than just analytically. So that's what we're talking about. Now, I would love for anybody who has any questions. You don't have to ask questions about this topic. You can ask any questions career related or any questions about emotional intelligence. There's a few ways you can do that. You can jump in directly here on Zoom, or you can type your questions into the comment section and Jane will get those over to me and I'll do my best to answer. So, all that being said, what questions do you have? How can I support you today? You're welcome to come off mute if you're in the meeting or type your questions into the comment section. So I can begin addressing one question of, how do I know what I really want? As somebody was sharing earlier that they're looking for, next opportunities and are struggling with that. And one of the ways to do that is to be aware of what your values are. What are the things that you care most about? And then you want to look at companies that resonate with that. And another thing is that you want to be aware of what your next steps are. What are the areas that you want to develop? What are the challenges that you want to face in a new job? And so that can give you some focus about where to begin. So if you are in the job market, that's something that can help you identify with what matters to you and what are the ways that you want to develop. And then you can scan for what companies are going to support you with that. Hey, welcome, Joe.
Morning, George. How are you?
I'm doing okay. How about yourself?
Hanging in there. Every day is a new day.
How's it going?
It's going pretty well. Unfortunately, we have a very sad funeral service on Friday for an officer we lost in the line of duty on a motorcycle accident. But we're dealing with that. We had a retired police chief pass away about a month ago. We just had his funeral. So those are emotional events for us, but that's law enforcement. Unfortunately, the nature of the business and life goes on. We continue to support Maui and providing support there. And any of our counties that asking for, because we're a larger department than most of our other counties, so we can provide support that they may or may not have or need at the time.
Okay. Oh my goodness. Well, Joe, I mean, we're talking about emotional intelligence in the workplace today. How could we support you today?
Today, that's a good question. Emotional intelligence to me is extremely important. It's an understanding of not just each employee and what they're thinking, but how and the overall strategy and vision of the department and how you inculcate that into the emotional intelligence of what you're teaching each individual or what you're learning about each individual and how their personal traits and characteristics can add to and enhance the vision and what we want going forward out of our employees, not just our sworn officers, but our civilian employees that support our patrol and other operations.
Mhm.
So how do we do that is a good question. I'm not the expert. I'm still learning that part.
Okay, well, so tell me a little bit more about what's your vision of what it would look like?
Well, so our vision is let us be revered in our mission to guard the people. So, and I use the word revered and guard, which is not typical in law enforcement. So revered is more of a heartfelt, emotional attachment to the mission, which is law enforcement, right? And that's codified in law and in the principles of law enforcement. So without, we don't have to, we apprehend criminals, we investigate crime, we keep social order or maintain social order. We don't always get to keep it, but we try to maintain it. And we want to guard the people, which means in my mind, and what I'm trying to get everybody to understand is at the end of the day, everybody goes home. So even the bad people get to go home. They might go to jail first. But they're alive, they're healthy, and they're going to jail. So it's about treating people with dignity and respect at the same time, doing your law enforcement job. And we saw that today with the Pennsylvania caught the individual, the wanted murderer that was hiding for the last 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And it didn't involve a shootout. It didn't involve a shot fired. The individual he's not going home. Of course, he's going back to jail, but he's alive and he's unharmed. And so, however, the dog got him to surrender. I don't know. I don't know all the facts about that, but just the fact that I saw him walk out and they carried him into the awaiting cars to transport him back to jail. I mean, those are all. So that tells me that they're guarding and not this protect, and I must protect at all costs. And if I have to, deadly force is necessary when it's necessary, but it's not always the first go-to, right? So how do we do that with emotional intelligence to try to put ourselves in the mind of the suspect so that we can, get a peaceful surrender and a peaceful ending to a solution. When our SWAT team goes out and calls out and we have individuals that are, barricading themselves in, is how do we get that individual out using our negotiation teams or crisis negotiation teams so that it's a peaceful ending. So we're not having to, because policemen don't want to kill people. That's not their intent. They don't wake up in the morning like that. But the actions of the individuals force a situation that sometimes. So how do we avoid those? How do we work better? How do we understand or get into the emotional intelligence of the individual and what they're thinking, what they're going through? And is law enforcement the right entity at this point in time to deal with this? Or is there another entity within the state or mental health provider to help us in doing what we do?
My goodness. Okay. Thank you for sharing this, Joe. No, this is wonderful. I hadn't thought about the book Never Split the Difference for a while. I don't know if you're familiar with that one. But the importance of officers knowing what's going on inside of themselves and how to respond with that and how to soothe. So what happens with our emotional state inside, we could picture the thumb as the amygdala, and my feelings, if I'm integrated, if I have all my feelings integrated, then I have this nice working model here. But if something happens and I get hijacked and all of a sudden I'm no longer don't have my feelings integrated, then I either fight, flee, or freeze. And sometimes there's another one that we're discovering, which is fawn. Sometimes I'll just fawn. And so oftentimes, if I'm in a situation and I don't know how to read what's happening in my body and I don't know how to soothe myself and name, okay, I'm feeling afraid, or I'm that, and I'm not acknowledging that what can happen is that I will respond inappropriately to a scenario. That I think about there's a story in the book Emotional Intelligence where an officer is, I think they're in Iraq, and they're marching and they see a group of people with guns and things coming their way, and everybody's starting to get really intense and like they're going to engage. And I think there might have been a call to prayer happening or something. And then what the commander realized was like, oh wait, like if we start to engage now, this is going to be a horrible slaughter.
Right.
And there's signs that are saying we don't need to do that. And so he just took a knee, and that showed a sign of respect to whatever call to prayer was happening. And so all of his soldiers took a knee, and then everybody was fine. There didn't have to be a fight. He was able to respond to the situation appropriately. But if I'm not aware of myself and I'm just seeing everything as a threat, there's often times where I will then create the thing that I was afraid of happening when I didn't necessarily have to make that happen. And I can see that playing out in all kinds of ways with what you do. And so for your team to be revered, means that they have a depth of understanding about themselves as individuals, and they're understanding what's going on inside of themselves such that they can interact with challenging scenarios effectively, and that they can even have people say like, wow, I'm so glad that this person was here and able to respond in the way that they did. This even helped me, because everybody is just trying to like work on whatever issues they're having, and sometimes they take measures that are not that great, and if somebody can help them through that, ultimately it's a good thing.
No, you're absolutely right. And trying to internalize the revered part of the emotion and staying abreast of, and the book Emotional Survival for Law Enforcement talks about hypervigilance and the fact that we're always in this heightened state, and so our emotions are not attached to us, they're all free flowing. And so how do we grasp that? And that the military and law enforcement for decades before, that's a culture change that has to come into today. And I think by and large it's here. It's manifesting. We've got to heighten it through the whole. Some of the old timers might still think of the old ways of I'm macho, I can't show emotion, I have to be rock solid, I've got to react, I have to take charge. And taking charge can also mean showing respect by taking a knee to, a country that is not your country. You're there visiting in a military fashion, not technically as a visitor, but you're there, hopefully not in an occupation kind of way, but to help the one entity win over the other. And so how do you do that, right? And like Afghanistan, where I spent a year of my time training the Afghan National Police. And so it's about, we're guests in their country, so how do we help them, and how do we not misunderstand what they're doing and react in a way? And we might have reacted, we could justify it, but is it the right reaction, right? And so I think in that aspect, as you said, that example was perfect. And sometimes it's just just taking a step back and saying, hey, okay, is what I see, or is it something else? And then what am I learning internally quickly as you look around and see the situation and analyze the entirety of the situation, and then take a reaction from that. But I think holding your emotions together and keeping those all intact is the most important thing. And that's one of the things that we have been working towards in our department, we're doing crisis intervention training for everyone so that they can grasp a little bit more of getting into an understanding of their emotions and how that impacts the situation.
What does crisis training entail?
It's I don't have the curriculum offhand, but it's 40 hours, so it's an extra week of training, talking about one. We have the psychologist from the Department of Health that comes in and talks to us about the thought processes of individuals who are, probably mentally unstable, maybe but because of drugs and alcohol abuse, maybe because of just circumstances within life, PTSD or other events Perhaps they were just born that way because of genetics. And so these may be homeless people or houseless people. They may be other individuals going through some kind of crisis. They may have a home, but they're just they're depressed and they take that out on other people, or maybe they're having some kind of drug or alcohol episode. And so, how do we deal with all that? So, the crisis intervention tries to teach us kind of the generics of what people are thinking as they are going through those different scenarios, and then how we as law enforcement can help um, really understand what they're going through, pull a lot of empathy forward so that we can put ourselves in their predicament, and then how do we peacefully resolve these situations.
Okay.
But
So,
sometimes you got to put yourself in harm's way.
and so that training, as they're getting in, learning about the other person, is there any way that they're learning about themselves?
Absolutely. I think so. They're getting a better understanding of where they are within their current characteristics, their traits, in this world of empathy and emotional intelligence. And then from that, how do they improve where they're weak, and where they sustain where they're good at. And so it kind of defines their baseline and how they can improve themselves.
Okay. Oh, cool.
Yeah.
What kind of results are you seeing?
Well, I'm seeing all positive results. All the ones that so far have gone through the training, we've brought them to scenes. We've asked them to be a part of scenarios. They've actually used the actual real world training. I just a month or two ago, I gave awards out for individuals that really, in situations, could have used deadly force, but they didn't. They chose not to, and they were standing in harm's way with an armed suspect, either with a knife or a gun, and they were able to use their crisis intervention training to de-escalate that situation, disarm the individual, and bring a peaceful resolution to the situation. And so, that it shows it's working in that aspect. I still have, other officers may be resisting the ability to change their mindset and how to improve on that, but that's very few. And so we're working towards getting everyone into this training. I think it's absolutely positive.
What do you make of that, the resistance?
I think it's just culture. It's not how they were trained. It's not the younger generation. It's the older generation that have been in the job 25, 30 years. There's one of the things that we worry about in law enforcement is growing into cynicism, because we always see the negative side of life. We see the negative side of people. At least we think we do. We don't. We see the good side of people too, because we're out and about talking to individuals. And if you do patrolling properly and you're out and about walking the streets, walking the neighborhoods, and you can drive too, but you can get out of your car every once in a while as you're patrolling, and go to the shopping center, talk to business owners, talk to patrons that are there. We do a lot of coffee with cops and a lot of events that are community related. And I go to as many as I can. And it's amazing to sit down and talk to people and just find out what's going on. And I think that's the most important thing, is officers got to get out there and just meet people and see the good side of the majority of people, what they're seeing every day. And the crime part is we're only seeing the negative side of, maybe 10, 12% of the population that's always committing crime. It's really the same people doing the same things. And unfortunately, the justice system is not as, we don't have space for everybody, right? And some people just need to be corrected. Some people don't belong in jail, but some people are not, they can't do it themselves, so they need other people to help them. So how do we do that? Mm-hmm. So we need better systems within the incarceration point to help them better themselves, so when they come out, they're better people.
Okay, well, Joe, this is, I mean, fascinating and good to hear. I mean, the work that you're doing and that you're getting the results that you're getting. And, I think as that continues, and, I see a lot of emphasis on the importance of soft skills. And it sounds like you have firsthand experience of that with your team. So that's really cool. And, and I think about that. One of the clips that we would show in some of our trainings would be the Braveheart clip where they're about ready to go up against like huge odds. And the fact that Mel Gibson's character in that he's an emotionally intelligent leader. You can see that he's afraid. He admits it.
Yeah.
He admits that his feelings are kind of hurt when someone's like, "You're not 8 feet tall." He's able to take that and work with it, make a joke out of it. And then he's able to passionately rally everybody together. So there's a depth to that. And I think that there's as we're, in a developing into a new model of manhood from only the old stoic emotionalist, sort of the John Wayne, like, rigid character to no, okay, that there's nothing wrong with that, but we also want to be in touch with our feelings, able to have emotional contact with our loved ones as well as our colleagues. And so we want to be able to have be solid when we need to be solid, but that doesn't mean only having that. We're actually more powerful when we're able to be solid, but we can also flex and flow. And so I think that's what I'm hearing you're doing in your department is bringing in a new model of policing, of
It's okay to be human. It's okay to show emotion. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be upset. It's okay to you can be upset, but you have to be controlled. You can be emotional, but you got to still be in charge. You still got to be able to. But we were doing a rehearsal the other day for the fallen officer, and as soon as they mentioned his name over the loudspeaker, we call it chicken skin. People call it goosebumps. I mean, the thought of that, and then I almost lost it right there on the ground, because I knew this individual more from the military side than I did from my police side, but he was a policeman and a military guy deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan multiple times. And it's unfortunate, but here we are with this situation. And so, so people are looking at me like, what's wrong with the chief? And I'm like, well, I'm a human. I lost somebody I know. And so that hurts.
Mhm.
Not just somebody I know, but an officer and a military person. And so, another human being. And so you just, I just embrace it, and that's who I am. And I'm trying to show people that it's okay. It's okay to be.
Joe, I was gonna say, would you be open to a different interpretation of how people were looking at you?
I, at my age and my experience, I don't care. I mean, people, this is who I am. If you don't like it, I'm sorry.
I suspect people were looking at you in a variety of ways. Some people really appreciating you and your feelings. Some looking at that as a way to allow themselves to experience their feelings more deeply. Some people kind of checking it out and being like, "Oh, that's interesting." I suspect that that's more of what was going on.
Yeah. When I say I don't care, it's just that I don't worry about embarrassing myself. I have no, to me, that doesn't even bother me anymore.
Yeah.
I'll pick up a mic and sing karaoke. I'm terrible at singing, but you know what? It's okay. It's who I am. It's just, yeah. And so I think people went through all kinds of emotions that were watching me. You had the macho guys going, "Oh, what's the matter with the chief? Why is he acting that way?" And it's because, it's okay. It's okay. And for me to do it is leading by example, right? So if I can do this and show that I'm emotional, but I can still take charge, I can still direct if I have to.
Mhm.
I can still make decisions. I can still, be the guy I need to be, or the officer I need to be. Then it's okay for you to do that too. And that's really what I'm trying to say.
That's beautiful. That's really beautiful. I mean, how else would you want to respond to somebody that you really care about? It's sad. Of course it's sad. And the sadness is an honoring of them, and honoring that they really meant something to you.
And it's okay. And, and if you go home and vent to your spouse, well, okay, and there are work that we have to do. And, the spouse is not always the professional that can help you when you vent about things that are going on. So, sometimes you got to be the listener because they need to vent, and it's a shared responsibility. And it's okay. So I talked to the new promotees that we have for sergeants, lieutenants, and I'm like, it's okay to go see somebody. It's okay to go get help. It's no longer these days where we're macho, we can take it all in and we'll be fine. We're not. We're not going to be fine. I did this. I was in the military for 40 years. I did police work for 20 years. Now I'm back. We're not fine. We need some assistance every now and then.
Yeah.
And it's not that we're going to go out and hurt people. It's just that you need somebody to vent other than your spouse because they probably heard enough. And you can vent to each other too, and that works.
That's a great takeaway. Joe, thank you so much for sharing.
No, you're welcome. I appreciate it.
I love that. I love that. So, Joe, thank you. And I'm seeing a question that I want to address about boosting emotional intelligence and networking. So, Joe, is there anything else that you want to share before I move on to a question?
No, I'm to talk about networking. I was just at a conference the other day, and I've got a couple coming up. Absolutely important. I mean, we can do things by Zoom, and this is a wonderful opportunity. I'm not going to fly to Chicago and meet with you and do all that kind of stuff but I can do it over this. In this environment, it works perfectly. But when you're at a conference, when you're at a meeting, it's by all means, networking face to face is the most important. And it's a human interaction that you can have. And so the emotional intelligence you can share, you can do it over Zoom. I think it's better in person. But it all depends on what kind of media, what kind of event that you're putting together. And so I think these are great opportunities. My first class I had to teach when I was teaching at the university was over Zoom, and I had no ideas. I never taught class before in that aspect. And so it was a different way for me to teach. And then when the classroom opened up, and then it was a completely different environment in the classroom. And so, but networking and emotional intelligence, how do you teach each other? How do you work with each other to talk about your feelings, talk about what works and what doesn't work? Some are best practices, some are how do you sustain and try to find your baseline, try to work with people that can help you understand how they see you and perceive you, maybe different than you perceive yourself. And so sometimes you'll learn from others.
Well, beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And I got to disappear. I got a meeting to get to.
Okay, Joe.
I appreciate
Get them.
Thanks, George.
Great seeing you.
I appreciate it. Thanks for all you're doing.
You bet. Many
Aloha.
blessings. So thank you, Joe. And now we've got Jenny's asking about tips in sharing on boosting emotional intelligence and networking. Well, first, if you're out networking, whether for a job or for your business, good on you. That's an important thing to be doing. Increasingly, jobs are found through networking, through connecting previous connections, previous people you've worked with. That's going to tend to be the case the older you get. So if I am at a networking event, and how could I boost my emotional intelligence? So one of the key things is to let myself take the time needed to be present. So to boost my emotional intelligence means that I'm going to be accepting that I'm feeling uncomfortable, or maybe even hurt about something, or maybe even angry about something. And I think we can play this out. I'll say a little more context too of I jump in Lake Michigan and I go in ice water, which is a scary thing. Every time I go into the freezing lake, I'm scared. Even though I've done it a bunch of times, I always have that initial like, oh geez, what am I doing? Well, if I'm really honest with myself, networking, going to a networking event is way scarier than going into freezing water. I never know what's going to happen. People are unpredictable. I'm always going to be afraid of being judged. There's just a lot with people. The two biggest fears are heights and public speaking. So being in front of people talking. So even if it's you don't consider networking public speaking, it's a public event, and there's you're connecting and oftentimes stepping outside of your comfort zone. So first of all is to just acknowledge the discomfort. It's helpful to acknowledge the discomfort instead of trying to pretend like I'm not uncomfortable. And just say, oh yeah, okay. I'm here at this event talking to people, and just like everybody else here, I'm a little uncomfortable. And then when I just pictured two people talking and me walking up to them and saying, hi, I'm George Miller. I'm, here. I'd like to join in the conversation. And then both people, immediately in that interaction, one of those people is likely to feel hurt. They were probably talking to that person. They might have wanted something from that person. And to just be aware of that, and they might not be conscious of the fact that their feelings were a little hurt, and maybe even felt a little angry at the interruption. But that kind of thing happens. And so then you might acknowledge that and say, excuse me for interrupting. I really, was. And then right there, you're acknowledging a little bit of your fear and a little bit of that interaction, acknowledging that person, and that can help smooth that entrance over. This is just one thing. There's no every interaction can be different. You just want a variety of responses. You're going to practice with how you respond to different people, and it'll never always be the same. And that's another thing. Let's say that you're talking to somebody at a networking event, and if somebody comes up to you, and the person you're talking to, and you start talking to them, be aware of the person that you've already been talking to and engaged with, because if you turn your full attention away from them, they're likely going to feel hurt and insulted. And so you can acknowledge somebody coming over and talking now, but make sure your main focus stays with that person. And if you are going to change your focus over to the other person, acknowledge it and say, great talking with you. I actually really do need to talk with this person, or this is a really important conversation. Welcome to stay, to join in here, but however is appropriate for you to acknowledge that. So see how there's kind of, you're taking a risk in acknowledging these little cues happening and little shifts of, whose feelings are hurt and where. By doing that, you're becoming the authority. You're becoming the adult. To compare to back to what Joe was just sharing in a very different environment, you're being more vulnerable and acknowledging imperfections and not having to control everything. You're taking authority. You're setting yourself up to be the bigger person in this. And I mean that in as mutual of a way as that can sound. So that's just, Jenny, when I saw your question, that's where my mind went. I'd love hear if this is helpful, or what more questions you have about, where you're at in networking right now, and what more emotional intelligence could mean for you in networking. Please share. I'd love to hear. Another thing that I recommend for a tip in rapport with people when you're networking is ask questions. People like talking about themselves. And you don't need to just be listening so that you can then say the thing you want to say and run your agenda. You can listen and relate to what they're saying. And if they're talking about their job or what project they're on, let yourself be with your feelings in it. Notice where you're uncomfortable with things. Notice where you're more interested in what they're saying, and you can respond with very simple things like, tell me more. You don't even have to say a word. You could just nod your head and acknowledge that you're listening. And say, oh, okay. And these little subtle cues that you give are having that person who, remember, is scared like you, whether or not conscious of it. I maintain that all human beings, we're all a little scared of each other. I just think it's natural. And so acknowledging that, they're sharing something, and your acknowledgement is encouraging to them, for them to keep going. The more and more you do this, the more of a trusted advisor you'll be for people, just being able to listen. You can notice where you want to jump in and say something and say, well, I think. It's like, what happens if I don't say that? What happens if I say, what do you mean by that? And see what happens. So there's a couple tips for boosting emotional intelligence and networking. One more thing I think of is just complimenting people. Everybody puts effort into what they're wearing, even if their effort is to look super casual. If it's unconscious, fine. But everybody has put themselves together in some kind of way, consciously or unconsciously. You can acknowledge that. Look for things to compliment or acknowledge, and you can start a conversation that way for things that you relate to. So if you're going out, if you're going into a thing, maybe wear something that you want somebody to comment on. And you can have, these little conversation starters that way, just to get it going, to start building rapport with people. And Jenny, I hope that's helpful. A great question. So I'm going to do a quick room reset. We're coming up on the end of the hour. This is Career Lab Wednesday. I'm George Miller, your host here. I'm with you every Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m. Central. I love it when you jump in directly on Zoom. I can talk one-to-one with you that way. If you can't, then you're welcome to type your questions into the comment section. Jane will get those over to me, and I'll do my best to answer your questions that way. So again, any questions are open. Anything career related, anything about emotional intelligence, go ahead and ask. No question too small, no question too big. Anything from interview prep, resume building, updating your LinkedIn, Those kinds of questions are great. Or how do I interact with my manager? How do I work with my mentor? What I'm having difficulties with my team. How can I have my team implement new strategies more? This kind of thing. Anything that you have on your heart that you want to ask career related, go ahead. And if you're not able to now, you can always set up a time to talk with me one-to-one. You can book a 15-minute call. I'll do my best to answer your questions and serve you as much as I can in that time. And if we need to, we can schedule more time or set up a coaching relationship. So I'll drop that link into the chat. You can book 15 minutes with me. And if you want to learn more about the foundations of emotional intelligence, fear, hurt, anger, sadness, joy, go ahead and take a look at my YouTube channel. I have a video there posted about that. You can listen into that, of course, as many times as you want. So I'll begin signing off here unless I get any last minute questions about coaching, about career, about emotional intelligence. Let me know if you have any questions. You can type them into the comment section. And if not, then I hope that those tips about boosting emotional intelligence and networking were helpful, and Joe's sharing about new developments in law enforcement and how emotional intelligence and soft skills are being used in the force. And with that, I'll be signing off. Many blessings. Thank you. Yes, you too. Have a great day. All right. Take care, everybody.